Hey guys, it's Julian, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make classic deep house like Theo Parrish and Mr. Fingers, aka Larry Heard. As usual, you get the project file and samples and MIDI and presets and all that kind of stuff in this video in the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already all available for you. And yeah, let's get started. So, this loop you heard in the intro, we're at 120 BPM, a little bit slower for house, but it works really well for this more chill, kind of like jazzy, old school stuff. And the first sound we have here is this choir sample, which sounds like this. So what's happening here, I'll show you the notes first. Basically, it's really simple. It's just playing an F minor 9 chord, and then a C minor 9 chord, and the next octave up. So we're in F minor. If you look at like the bass line, is probably the best way I can establish that. You can see, yeah, we're in F minor. So this is just kind of following along with that, you know, just kind of droning on. And then at the end, it changes up to that other chord, which still works with the key, but I want to just switch it up a little bit. Like with these kinds of tracks, this is kind of like the vibe, you know, like you'll have like a long droning chord like this, but it doesn't just stay on one chord for too long. So I want to switch it up. And then like I said, about the actual chords, they're just minor 9 chords. So what they are is just regular minor chords, actually. If I take off these voices. There we go. Just F minor and C minor. And then we just add a minor 7 and then a 9th on top of that. And there you go. So it's pretty simple, but these are really good chords for this style. You know, if you want that really jazzy, deep house kind of sound, I definitely would recommend using like either minor 7th or 9th or major 7th or 9th, but some kind of chords like that. For the sound on this one, I made it using actually a sample. So what we have here is I have this little sample. Kind of like an old like M1 sort of style pad, you know, any like choir or string sample or any of those kinds of things works really well for this type of sound. But just something that's really like long and held out and breathy like that. And then what I did was I brought it into a simpler here. And you can see I've turned the attack up a little bit. I got a little bit of release on that as well. But what I've also done is I've looped it. And the thing with the looping is you have to use this fade. So what the fade does is it basically just makes it like smoothly loop like that, right? Like if we just had this, let's make a new little track here. If I just have this and we loop it, I'll play it up high so it goes quick. You can hear it's like really audible when it gets back to the start of the loop. But if you use the fade, it doesn't. It's really smooth. You don't hear that little click. So that's what we do here. And then the key with the fade is you have to turn up the start time and the length, because if you just have this on the default setting, which is like this, you can see the fade is at 100% and it's not doing anything. But once you start bringing those in, that's how you kind of like activate the fade. And again, the fade is really important because it's going to make this like smooth so you're not hearing it click in the background and it's not throwing you off. So after that, I have a few effects. The first thing we have here is just a bit of chorus. Here's without it. And then with it, you can hear it just adds a little bit more kind of width and space to the sound. And speaking of space, the next sound we have here, or the next effect we have here is a little bit of reverb. So that is also just adding a bit of atmosphere and space. This helps to kind of put it in the back a little bit as well, like without it. It's very in your face. When you add the reverb, it kind of goes to the background a little bit. So kind of a nice technique and kind of like theory behind it there. And then the last thing we have on here is just an EQ8 cutting out the low end, and that is it for the choir sample. Next thing we have here is this little FM stab, which sounds like this. So this is just playing an F minor 9 chord, same one I was showing you with the pad. Except this one is just a little bit more rhythmic. Obviously that one was like holding out. This one just kind of comes in. There, so this is kind of, like with the theory behind this, you know, it's kind of nice to have two different styles here. Like, we have a lot of harmonic stuff going on. It's not just like the kick, or it's not just like the bass and the drums and a rhythmic stab, you know? It's like having both of these. It's kind of like adding enough stuff over top of that, if that makes any sense. Like, if we only had the stab, or we only had the choir, it would just feel too much like it was just the rhythm section. But because you have, multiple different types of things playing these chords here, I feel like it's really adding to the overall sound. Now, for the sound on this one, I made it using Operator. It's a pretty simple FM sound. You can see we just have 2 sine waves with a little bit of, I've just got those up a little bit, and we've got the envelopes set to be kind of short and plucky. I've also got the octave of the second one up 1 octave. And then we have those going into a low pass filter. And the low pass is set like this, and I've got an envelope on there, so here's without that. And then with it, so you can hear it's subtle, but it just adds a little bit to like the pluckiness of the sound. After that, we have a bit of chorus. Here's without that. And then with it. So really like chorus for these kind of like bright FM sounds. It's a really nice way to add more dimension to it. Because without it, it just feels very like flat and kind of rough around the edges. But this just makes it feel a lot softer and smoother. After that, we have a bit of reverb. Here's without that. And then with it. So you can imagine this is pretty nice for this sound because it's so quick and rhythmic. It helps to kind of have it ring out a little bit and not have it just like stop right as soon as the notes stop. And then the last thing we have on there is just a bit of drum bass to kind of fatten it up. This is adding a little bit of like crunch to the sound you may be able to hear. It's fattening it up, but it is also adding that little kind of like crunchy thing to it, which I don't mind, I feel like that helps, like, when you're trying to get this more old school kind of like analog sound, having something like that kind of makes it more authentic, I feel like. And yeah, that is it for the stab. The next thing we have here is the bass line, which sounds like this. So here are the notes for this. Like I was saying before, it's just following an F minor chord. Like we have F, the root note, G sharp, the minor third, another F, which is again the root note, C, which is the fifth, and then there's this G here, which is technically the ninth, but I mean. But yeah, and then the pattern is just kind of like going like on and on like this. This is typically the vibe with these types of tracks. You'll have like a bass line like this, and then like some kind of something over top it that's changing. Like that choir sample, while the bass just keeps droning on that same note, and it really gives it like a driving feel, That's the interesting thing about these kinds of bass lines is, I feel like house is grooving and techno is driving, right? But I feel like this bass line is kind of doing both because it has like a very like driving rhythm to it where it's just going on and on, but it's also very groovy, it's really bouncing off of that kick. So for the sound on this one, I made it using analog. What we have here is a square wave and a saw wave. I've got the saw wave an octave up, and I've got them detuned a little bit. And then those are going into a low pass filter, so the low pass has a bit of an envelope on it. You can hear that. It's also got a bit of resonance. That's how you get it, that more like juicy kind of old school sound as well. Like if I turn the resonance off. Yeah, you can hear that's just adding a lot of that, like I said, kind of nice old school vibe to it. And then the only other thing that I have in here is just a little bit of vibrato and some unison to kind of fatten it up. Here's without those. And then with them, so you can hear they just add a little bit more texture to the sound. And that is it for inside of analog. After that, we have a bit of chorus, so kind of just adding to what the unison was doing. Here's without it. And then with it, you can hear it really helps to kind of give this bass some more texture and make it not just sound like a dry synth. And speaking of adding texture, the other effect I have on there is a saturator. So here's without that. And then with it. So this really helps to fatten it up. If you want like a more warm analog sounding bass, definitely any kind of saturation or like thing like that that's going to add some texture is a good way to do it. And you can hear the difference there. And yeah, that is it for the bass. Next thing we have here is the kick, which sounds like this. So this is a pretty simple kick. With this one, it's more about the sample selection. This type of kick is very popular in these old school kind of house tracks, like just a very tight, short, still like thumpy kick like this. But like I said, it's very tight and short, and it just kind of plays quickly, and then you get the bass line playing over it like that with all the low ends. So yeah, as you know, this is kind of like, as opposed to having like a big boomy like 909 kick or something like that, like you would have in more modern house. With this style, just kind of again like this more chill, kind of deeper, almost like a live type of kick. Fits really well with the drums, you can hear, and with the bass. So again, it's about choosing the type of kick that's going to fit into the track with everything else the best, as opposed to just choosing like a kick that you think sounds good that is maybe clashing with the other elements. The only effect I have on there is just a bit of drum bus to fatten it up. Here's without that. And then with it, you know, like this just helps again to kind of give it some more punch, make it hit a little bit harder in the mix. And that is it for the kick. Next thing we have here is this percussion drum rack, which sounds like this. So you can hear this has just got these 3 different percussion sounds. We've got a snare, and then 2 rim shots. And yeah, I just have this kind of adding some percussion to the beat. You know, pretty simple stuff. Just sort of like, with this one, it's more about the style of sounds you want. You know, you want like some very nice kind of drum machine style sounds. You know, you wouldn't want to use any kind of like super futuristic sounding percussion or anything like that. But these nice kind of more old school drum machine samples fit really well into this track. And yeah, the next thing that we have here, these hi-hats, which sound like this. So this is pretty simple stuff. You know, it's just a closed hi-hat and an open hi-hat. Again, kind of like more old school drum machine style sounds. And yeah, pretty simple stuff. I mean, I guess one thing to talk about is like the mixing. Like, you know, you always want the closed hi-hat to be quieter. If I turn that up, you can hear it. It feels kind of weird. But if you have it kind of like where when the open hi-hat comes in, it's hitting a lot louder, it'll feel a little bit better and more groovy. So yeah, the next thing we have here is this tambourine, which sounds like this. This is pretty simple. This is just something that I've noticed in a lot of these tracks, like underneath the closed hi-hat, which is just playing 16th notes. They'll often have a tambourine like this, and it works really well because you can hear the closed hi-hat is kind of like more mid-rangey and more for like, you know, the attack of the sound. But this tambourine adds like some nice kind of brightness on top that we wouldn't have had without it. It's definitely a nice thing to have there. And then the next thing we have here is this clap, which sounds like this. So again, pretty simple, just like a nice kind of hard-hitting clap, like a drum machine style clap. Definitely don't want to use like a hand clap or anything like that for this. And yeah, so then I have all that percussion in a group, and we just have a little bit of processing on the group. I'll show you. Here is with nothing, and then with everything. So this is meant to be kind of like, you know, when you have a drum machine or something like that, like they were using a lot back in the days. A lot of drum machines do have like single outputs for every individual sound, but a lot of times people would just be putting the whole drum machine through whatever effect, or, you know, just recording the whole drum machine, every drum at once through the mixer, stuff like that, you know. So what this is doing is kind of simulating that. It's like putting the same effects on everything, and that's how you really get that like cohesive kind of analog feel with your percussion, is by saturating it all together and EQing it all together and just giving it all a lot of the same processing. Because when you put the same processing on everything at once, even if they're very different sounds, they're getting that exact same, like those exact same, in this case, saturation and EQ settings. So just that alone is going to kind of tie everything together a bit more. And I'll show you again. Here's with nothing. And then with all the processing. So you can hear everything just feels a lot more cohesive and together when we have this. So the first thing we have here is a drum bus. This is the first thing that's really helping to glue these together. Any kind of saturation like this really works for that. Yeah, you can hear it kind of just brings all the volume levels up to a more even level, as well as saturating everything and making everything sound fatter and stronger. And then after that, we just have this EQ8, which is cutting at the low end. Kind of cleans it up and makes room for the kick and the bass. And yeah, so that is it for the percussion group. And that is going to be it for this one as well, guys. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. Once again, you get the project file and samples, and MIDI, and presets for this video in the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because they're already available. as always, also, make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Let me know what you want to see me do next. This is one that was requested actually by a bunch of you guys, so I hope you enjoyed. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.